Sometimes Allah allows your presence to fade from people's attention. Messages stop, doors feel quiet, and you begin to wonder if you have been forgotten. Nothing is clearly wrong, yet something feels different inside. Ibn Arabi teaches that this kind of invisibility is not rejection, it is protection. Allah hides certain servants when their inner work needs silence, away from noise and interference. In this reflection, we will understand why being unseen can be a sign that Allah is preparing something deeper within you. The world quietly teaches us a powerful idea from a very young age. If you are seen, you matter, and if you are noticed, you are successful. Recognition becomes a kind of proof of worth. Applause feels like confirmation. Being spoken about feels like arrival. Over time, this belief settles deep in the heart, so deeply that when visibility fades, the soul begins to question its own value. Many people feel closer to loss when attention disappears than when something is openly taken away. But the inner path teaches something far more subtle and far more demanding. Ibn Arabi explains that visibility does not always bring benefit, and in many cases, it brings harm before it brings growth. When a soul becomes visible too early, it becomes exposed to forces it is not yet strong enough to handle. Attention bends intention. Praise quietly feeds the ego. Expectations begin to shape actions, not according to truth, but according to what others want to see. Slowly, sincerity turns into performance, and the heart begins to act rather than to be. This is why Allah sometimes removes the audience, not as a punishment and not as rejection, but as protection. When Allah intends to refine a servant inwardly, He often pulls them away from public spaces, from constant interaction, and from being evaluated by others. Inner work requires privacy. Just as seeds must remain buried in the soil to grow roots, the soul needs darkness before it can support light. Exposure too early weakens what is still forming. Many people misunderstand this phase because they judge it through worldly measures. They see quiet as failure, withdrawal as decline, and invisibility as loss of relevance. But on the inner path, silence is often a sign that something serious is happening. When Allah is shaping the heart, He limits distractions. When He is strengthening sincerity, He removes comparison. When He is protecting humility, He takes away applause. Visibility carries weight. Every gaze leaves an imprint. Every opinion pulls the soul slightly off-center. For a heart that is still learning balance, too many eyes can scatter focus. Ibn Arabi warns that the soul can be damaged not only by hardship, but also by attention that arrives before readiness. Being seen invites expectations. Expectations invite pressure. Pressure slowly pushes the heart to abandon truth in favor of approval. This is why many people feel strangely exhausted during times of visibility, even when nothing is outwardly wrong. They may receive praise, respect, or acknowledgement, yet feel internally drained. The soul senses that it is being pulled outward while its work is meant to be inward. Allah, in His mercy, sometimes removes a person from this strain before it causes lasting harm. If you find yourself unseen right now, it may not be because you lack significance. It may be because Allah is guarding the integrity of what He is forming within you. The heart is not meant to grow under constant observation. Growth requires mistakes that no one witnesses, questions that no one answers, and moments of weakness that are never judged. Visibility interrupts this process. There is also a deeper danger in being seen too soon, the confusion between spiritual progress and social validation. When people begin to associate their closeness to Allah with how they are perceived by others, their path becomes unstable. Faith rises and falls with feedback. Confidence depends on response. Ibn Arabi teaches that true nearness must stand even when no one affirms it. Otherwise, it is not nearness, It is dependence. Allah knows this weakness in the human heart. He knows how easily sincerity can be diluted, so He removes the mirrors. When there is no reflection from others, the heart is forced to look directly at itself. This is uncomfortable, but it is honest. It reveals whether actions are done for Allah alone or quietly fueled by recognition. The removal of visibility also teaches patience. A soul that is unseen learns to move without immediate reward. It learns to trust Allah without constant reassurance. It continues walking even when there are no signs of progress. This patience is not passive. It is active endurance. It strengthens the heart in ways visibility never could. There is a reason many prophets and saints experienced long periods of obscurity before being known. Not because they were insignificant, but because they were being prepared. The weight of guidance cannot be carried by a heart that still seeks approval. The responsibility of influence cannot rest on a soul that has not been purified from self-interest. Allah delays exposure until inner stability is established. If your life feels quieter than before, if your presence feels less noticed, and if your efforts seem to unfold without recognition, this may be an invitation rather than a setback. Allah may be teaching your heart how to stand without support, how to act without applause, and how to remain sincere when no one is watching. These are not small lessons, they are foundations. Remember that honor on the inner path is not measured by visibility, but by alignment. Not by how many people see you, but by how deeply your heart remains anchored when no one does. Allah does not hide what is worthless. He hides what is fragile, valuable, and still becoming. When the time is right, visibility may return, but when it does, it will rest on a heart that no longer needs it. That is when being seen becomes safe. When the heart first enters a period of being hidden, it rarely feels gentle. Most people do not experience it as mercy at the beginning. Instead, it feels confusing, lonely, and even unsettling. The mind searches for explanations, often assuming that something has gone wrong or that progress has stopped. This reaction is natural because the human heart is accustomed to equating closeness with attention and care with visibility. When these disappear, it feels like loss. But Ibn Arabi teaches that Allah's mercy does not always arrive in comforting forms. Sometimes mercy arrives as restraint, sometimes it comes as distance, and sometimes it appears as being quietly removed from situations, people, or spaces that would harm the soul more than help it. Allah hides what He values, not because it lacks worth, but because it requires protection. To understand this, one must first understand how fragile the inner state truly is. Spiritual growth does not happen all at once. It unfolds layer by layer, and each layer carries its own vulnerability. A heart that is opening cannot withstand constant judgment, comparison, or misunderstanding. Exposure at the wrong time can harden it, distort it, or push it into defenses that slow its growth. Allah, who knows the inner architecture of every soul, shelters certain hearts until they are strong enough to stand. This is why being hidden is not abandonment, it is preservation. Just as a gardener shields a young plant from harsh wind and direct heat, Allah shields the heart from influences that could stunt its development. Many people assume that mercy always looks like ease, companionship, or expansion, but mercy sometimes looks like being spared from what would break you before you are ready. There are seasons in which the soul is not meant to be understood by others. During these times, being visible would mean being misinterpreted. Words would be twisted, intentions would be questioned, and growth would be judged through shallow lenses. Ibn Arabi explains that misunderstanding is one of the heaviest burdens on a developing soul, because it forces the heart to either defend itself or retreat from truth. Allah, in His care, removes the need for defense by removing exposure. When others fail to recognize your growth, it does not mean your growth is not real. It may simply mean that Allah has decided that their recognition is not part of your nourishment right now. The soul does not feed on approval, it feeds on alignment, and alignment is cultivated in quiet spaces where the heart can listen without interruption. What often feels like isolation is actually separation from harm. Comparison drains sincerity, constant interaction dilutes focus. Social noise pulls the heart outward when its work must be inward. Allah reduces these pressures not because He wants to deprive the servant, but because He wants to protect what is forming beneath the surface. There is also mercy in being spared from expectations. When people expect things from you, they unknowingly place weight on your heart. You begin to carry their projections, their hopes, and their assumptions. This weight can distort intention, making actions feel heavy rather than sincere. Allah lifts this burden by reducing visibility, allowing the heart to move freely again. Another hidden mercy lies in emotional safety. Not every environment is safe for vulnerability. Not every listener is capable of holding what the soul is learning. When Allah hides a servant, He is often preventing wounds that would slow progress. Silence can be safer than explanation. Distance can be kinder than engagement. What looks like loneliness may actually be divine protection from unnecessary pain. Ibni Arabi also points out that veiling trains trust. When external signs of progress disappear, the heart is forced to rely on Allah rather than feedback. This deepens reliance in a way that visible success never can. Trust built in invisibility is strong because it is not supported by evidence. It stands on faith alone. Many people only feel close to Allah when things are clear, affirmed, and moving forward visibly. But closeness tested in hiddenness is far more real. It proves that the relationship is not transactional. The heart learns to remain devoted without immediate reassurance. This is a rare and precious state. It is important to understand that being hidden does not mean being stagnant. In fact, inner movement is often greatest during these quiet phases. Roots grow downward when branches are still. Strength develops where no one can see it. Allah works deeply before He works openly. If you are in a period where your efforts seem unnoticed and your presence feels reduced, do not rush to escape it. Ask instead what Allah might be protecting you from. Ask what distractions have been removed. Ask what inner space has been created. Mercy often reveals itself later, when you look back and realize how much harm you were spared. Allah does not withhold visibility out of cruelty. He withholds it out of wisdom. Some things must be completed in silence to survive in light. Some hearts must be strengthened away from eyes to remain sincere when eyes return. Being hidden is not the end of your path. It is a shelter along the way, and shelters are not places of abandonment, but places of care. When a person becomes less visible, something very important begins to happen inside the heart. Without attention, without praise, and without feedback, the soul is forced to confront its true reasons for walking the path. This is one of the most uncomfortable stages of inner growth, because it removes the supports that many people unknowingly rely on. When no one is watching, the heart can no longer hide behind appearance. It must face itself honestly. Intention is fragile. It can be sincere at the beginning and slowly shift without the person realizing it. A good action may start for Allah, but over time it can become tied to how others respond. Recognition quietly enters, and the heart begins to expect it. When this happens, worship becomes heavier, effort becomes conditional, and disappointment follows whenever appreciation fades. Invisibility interrupts this process. When Allah removes attention, He removes confusion. The heart is left alone with its actions and must answer a simple but difficult question. Would I still do this if no one ever noticed? This question exposes what is real and what is mixed. It reveals whether devotion is rooted in love for Allah or sustained by external validation. This is why invisibility feels uncomfortable. It strips away emotional rewards. There is no applause to motivate consistency and no admiration to soften difficulty. The soul feels naked in its effort. But this exposure is not meant to shame the heart. It is meant to clean it. Just as water washes away dirt that clings to the surface, invisibility washes away hidden attachments that cling to intention. Ibni Arabi teaches that sincerity cannot be perfected in crowded spaces. The heart needs privacy to be honest. When people are watching, the soul naturally adjusts itself. It becomes careful, guarded, and performative without realizing it. In isolation, these adjustments fall away. What remains is truth. Many people discover during this phase that they were stronger than they thought. Without encouragement, they continue. Without reward, they persist. Their remembrance becomes quieter but deeper. Their connection becomes less emotional but more stable. This is the purification that invisibility brings. Others discover something different. They feel resistance. Motivation weakens. They feel empty and discouraged. This too is part of purification. It reveals where reliance was misplaced. It shows the heart what it was leaning on besides Allah. This discovery is painful, but it is necessary. A heart cannot be healed without first being diagnosed. Invisibility also removes competition. When no one is comparing you, the heart stops measuring itself against others. It no longer asks who is ahead or behind. It no longer seeks superiority or fears inferiority. The journey becomes personal again. This return to inward focus is essential for sincerity, because comparison always contaminates intention. Another aspect of purification is freedom. When no one expects anything from you, the heart moves more lightly, actions become simpler, worship becomes quieter. The soul begins to act without pressure. This freedom allows intention to settle naturally, without force. What is forced rarely remains pure. Ibn Arabi emphasizes that Allah is not interested in the appearance of actions, but in the state from which they arise. Invisibility directs attention back to this state. It shifts focus from outcomes to alignment. The heart learns to ask not whether something was seen, but whether it was true. There is also humility in invisibility. Without recognition, the ego has little to feed on. Pride weakens, self-importance softens. The heart becomes more aware of its dependence on Allah. This humility is not humiliation, it is clarity. It allows the soul to see itself accurately, without exaggeration or denial. Some people fear that if they are unseen for too long, they will lose momentum. But Ibn Arabi teaches the opposite. Momentum built on recognition is unstable. Momentum built on sincerity is steady. It may move slowly, but it does not collapse when conditions change. Invisibility also strengthens patience. The heart learns to wait without reassurance. It continues without signs. This patience is active trust. It trains the soul to walk by faith rather than by evidence. Such patience prepares the heart for responsibilities that require endurance rather than excitement. Over time, something shifts. The absence of attention becomes less painful. The heart grows quieter. Actions feel lighter. The need to be seen fades. At this point, intention has been purified enough to stand on its own. The soul no longer requires an audience to remain devoted. This is why Allah allows invisibility to last longer than expected. Purification cannot be rushed. The heart must unlearn habits formed over years. It must detach from subtle dependencies. This takes time. Silence accelerates what noise delays. If you are in this phase and feel unsure of yourself, know that confusion is part of the process. The heart is being recentered. What feels like emptiness is often space being created. What feels like loss is often excess being removed. Invisibility does not mean Allah is distant. In many cases, it means He is closer than ever. He is watching while others are not. He is listening while the world is quiet. He is refining what will one day be strong enough to stand without distortion. When intention is purified in invisibility, visibility, if it returns, becomes safe. The heart will not chase it, fear it, or depend on it. It will remain steady regardless of circumstance. When Allah intends to deepen a servant's inner awareness, one of the first changes that often appears is a quieting of the outer world. This reduction does not usually arrive as a clear decision or dramatic event. Instead, conversations naturally thin out, social energy fades, and many of the distractions that once filled the day begin to lose their pull. What once felt busy now feels distant. What once demanded attention now feels unnecessary. This shift can be confusing, especially for those who associate activity with purpose and connection with progress. Ibn Arabi explains that depth cannot be formed in constant noise. The heart is like a vessel, and when it is filled with too many sounds, opinions, and demands, it cannot hold subtle understanding. Noise fragments attention. It pulls the soul outward in many directions at once, leaving little space for reflection. Allah, who knows the capacity of each heart, reduces this noise when He intends to increase perception. This reduction is not meant to shrink life, but to clarify it. When conversations decrease, the heart begins to listen more carefully. When distractions fade, awareness sharpens. When the outer world quiets, the inner voice becomes audible. Many people fear this quiet because it exposes thoughts and feelings that were previously drowned out. But this exposure is necessary. Depth begins where distraction ends. The human mind often resists stillness. Silence can feel uncomfortable because it removes escape. Without noise, the heart must face itself. Questions arise, old emotions surface. Unresolved intentions come into view. This can feel heavy, but it is not a sign of regression. It is a sign that the soul is entering a space where real understanding can form. Allah does not grant deep awareness to a heart that is constantly divided. Depth requires presence. Presence requires simplicity. This is why Allah simplifies the outer life before expanding the inner one. Ibn Arabi teaches that clarity is not given to those who collect experiences, but to those who can remain present within them. Noise scatters presence. Stillness gathers it. Another aspect of reduced noise is the removal of unnecessary relationships and engagements. This does not mean that people are rejected or devalued. It means that certain connections no longer serve the direction of the soul. Some relationships keep the heart anchored to old versions of itself. Some conversations reinforce patterns that no longer align with growth. Allah gently loosens these ties, not out of harshness, but out of care. This process often feels like loss at first. The heart may miss the familiarity of constant interaction. It may feel empty or disconnected, but over time, something else begins to take shape. The heart becomes more spacious. It feels less pulled and more grounded. Thoughts become clearer. Intentions settle. This is the beginning of depth. Depth is not emotional intensity. It is stability. A deep heart is not easily shaken by circumstances. It does not react quickly or excessively. It observes before it responds. This steadiness cannot develop in a loud environment. Just as clear water requires stillness, clear perception requires quiet. Allah also reduces noise to protect the servant from overload. Not every heart can carry multiple responsibilities, expectations, and roles at once without strain. When Allah intends to entrust a servant with deeper insight, He often lightens their outer burden so that the inner work does not collapse under pressure. This is mercy disguised as limitation. Many people misunderstand this phase and try to fill the quiet again. They seek distraction, conversation, or stimulation to escape discomfort, but doing so delays the process. Ibn Arabi emphasizes that stillness is not an absence of life, but a different quality of life. It is a space where meaning condenses rather than disperses. In this quieter state, the heart begins to notice subtleties it once missed. Feelings are recognized earlier. Intentions are examined more carefully. The presence of Allah is sensed more gently, but more consistently. This is not excitement, it is intimacy, and intimacy requires privacy. If your life feels simpler, quieter, or more contained than before, it may not be because you are losing something. It may be because Allah is teaching your heart how to hold depth without strain. Expansion without containment leads to instability. Stillness builds the foundation that depth rests upon. This phase is not meant to last forever in the same form, but it must last long enough to do its work. Rushing out of it weakens what it is meant to build. Remaining patient allows clarity to settle naturally. Allah does not reduce noise to isolate the heart permanently. He reduces it so that when sound returns, it does not overwhelm. A heart that has learned stillness can move through activity without losing itself. That is true depth. One of the most delicate dangers on the inner path is unveiling before readiness. Ibn Arabi repeatedly warned that insight revealed too early can harm the soul more than ignorance ever could. This is difficult to understand at first because most people assume that clarity, awareness, and spiritual opening are always blessings regardless of timing. Yet timing is everything. What strengthens a mature heart can overwhelm an unprepared one. When Allah grants insight, responsibility comes with it. Understanding is not neutral. It reshapes how a person sees the world, how they see themselves, and how they relate to others. If the heart has not yet developed humility, balance, and restraint, insight can quietly turn into pride, confusion, or isolation. Allah, in His wisdom, protects certain servants by delaying exposure until the inner structure is strong enough to carry what is given. This is why some people sense growth inside themselves, but see no outward change in their lives. They may feel their awareness deepening, their attachment to the world loosening, and their sensitivity increasing, yet nothing becomes visible to others. This is not stagnation, it is shelter. Allah is allowing the inner transformation to stabilize before it is tested by reaction, misunderstanding, or pressure. Premature unveiling creates a subtle problem. The soul begins to identify with what it has been shown. Insight becomes an identity rather than a responsibility. The heart may start measuring itself against others, believing it has reached something special. This shift is often unconscious, but it is dangerous. Ibn Arabi emphasized that the greatest veils are formed from spiritual experiences that are misunderstood. Allah prevents this by keeping certain experiences hidden until the heart is grounded enough to receive them without attachment. Another risk of early unveiling is misunderstanding by others. Not every listener can hear truth without distortion. Not every environment can hold depth without reacting defensively. When insight is shared too soon, it may be judged, ridiculed, or misused. This can wound the heart and cause it to retreat from truth or dilute itself to be accepted. Allah protects the servant from this harm by limiting exposure. Being hidden during this phase is not a sign that Allah is withholding favor. It is a sign that He is guarding trust. What is entrusted prematurely can be lost. What is protected until maturity becomes stable. Just as heavy rain can destroy a young plant, too much unveiling can overwhelm a developing soul. There is also protection from responsibility that the heart is not yet ready to carry. Visibility brings expectation. Expectation brings pressure. Pressure demands consistency. If the inner state has not yet stabilized, this pressure can fracture sincerity. Allah delays visibility so that the servant does not feel forced to maintain appearances before truth has fully settled. Many people feel frustrated during this stage because they sense readiness without seeing confirmation. They feel something unfolding inside, but receive no outward validation. This frustration is understandable, but it is also part of the training. It teaches the heart to trust Allah's timing rather than its own sense of urgency. What the soul feels ready for emotionally may not yet be ready structurally. Hiddenness also protects the servant from becoming attached to spiritual outcomes. When nothing is visible, the heart learns to act without expecting results. This breaks subtle dependencies. It shifts focus from achievement to alignment. Ibn Arabi taught that true realization does not announce itself. It stabilizes quietly until action flows naturally from it. There is a deep mercy in being spared from early influence. Influence magnifies flaws as much as it magnifies truth. If ego, impatience, or insecurity still exists beneath the surface, visibility will amplify it. Allah waits until these traits soften before allowing exposure. This is not delay, it is precision. Over time, something important happens. The desire to be seen weakens, the urgency to share fades. The heart becomes more contained, more patient, and more rooted. This is a sign that the protection is working. The servant is no longer trying to carry what Allah has not yet released. When unveiling eventually happens, if it is meant to happen at all, it arrives without strain. There is no rush, no anxiety, and no need to defend or explain. The heart remains stable because it was formed in silence. What emerges then does not collapse under pressure because it was built away from it. If you are hidden right now and feel that something inside you is developing without recognition, trust that Allah knows the weight of what He is forming. Trust that protection is active even when progress feels invisible. What is being prepared quietly will stand firmly when it appears. When visibility fades and the outer world grows quiet, a subtle shift begins inside the heart. Without the constant presence of people, expectations, and reactions, the soul naturally turns inward. What once depended on external connection now seeks internal grounding. This inward turn is not forced. It happens quietly, almost without notice, as the heart searches for stability where noise no longer provides it. Ibn Arabi teaches that nearness to Allah is often misunderstood. Many imagine it as an emotional high, a burst of clarity, or a sudden sense of certainty. But true nearness is calmer than that. It is a steady awareness that develops when distractions are removed. When a person is no longer preoccupied with being seen, they become more capable of seeing what truly matters. Invisibility creates space. In that space, the heart begins to listen differently. Supplications become less performative and more honest. Worship becomes less about feeling something and more about presence. The need to explain oneself to others diminishes, and the heart slowly learns to stand without leaning on external affirmation. This is one of the clearest signs that closeness is forming. As attachments to people and outcomes loosen, reliance shifts. The heart stops looking outward for reassurance and begins to rely more deeply on Allah. This reliance is not dramatic, it is quiet and steady. It does not announce itself, but it reshapes how the soul responds to uncertainty. Fear softens, urgency slows, trust grows in subtle but lasting ways. There is a particular intimacy that forms when the servant realizes that Allah sees them even when no one else does. Being unseen by creation highlights the reality of being fully seen by the Creator. This awareness brings comfort that does not depend on circumstances. The heart feels held, not because things are clear, but because presence is felt. In this phase, remembrance often becomes simpler. Long explanations fall away, words reduce, the heart learns to remain with Allah without needing elaborate expression. This simplicity deepens connection. Ibn Arabi emphasized that the deepest forms of knowing are not loud. They are stable, gentle, and consistent. Invisibility also removes fear of judgment. When no one is watching, the heart can be honest about its struggles. It can turn to Allah without shame, without comparison, and without the pressure to appear strong. This honesty invites mercy. It allows healing to occur without defense. Many people worry that drawing inward will make them distant from the world. In reality, it prepares them to return without losing themselves. A heart that has learned to rely on Allah rather than attention can move through people without being shaped by them. This balance is rare and valuable. Nearness formed in invisibility is resilient. It does not collapse when conditions change. It does not depend on praise or approval. It remains steady whether the world is quiet or loud. This is why Allah sometimes leads His servants through hidden paths. The closeness developed there is strong enough to last. If you are in a season where your connection to people has lessened, but your awareness of Allah has deepened, do not rush to change it. This is not withdrawal for its own sake. It is alignment. It is the heart being gently repositioned toward its true center. When the time comes for visibility to return, if it is meant to return, the heart will carry this closeness with it. It will not be lost in attention or inflated by recognition. It will remain anchored, because it was formed where only Allah was watching. This is the quiet gift of invisibility. It draws the heart away from noise and closer to truth, away from dependence and toward trust, away from being seen and toward being known by the one who sees all. If you have listened to these reflections and felt seen in your own quiet experience, know that this hidden season is not an error in your journey. It is not a sign that you are behind, overlooked, or drifting away from Allah. It is a sign that something meaningful has been entrusted to you, something that requires silence, patience, and care to take shape. Being unseen does not mean being abandoned. It means the noise has been lowered, so the heart can be adjusted without interference. What Allah shapes in stillness is not weak, it is stable. What grows without attention does not depend on it later, and what is formed away from eyes does not crumble when eyes return. Do not measure this phase by results, reactions, or recognition. Measure it by what is being softened, strengthened, and clarified inside you. If your heart feels quieter but more honest, less busy but more present, less visible but more anchored, then the work is happening exactly where it needs to happen. Trust that Allah knows when to hide and when to reveal. Trust that nothing real is being delayed and nothing essential is being taken away. When the time is right, what was protected in silence will move forward with weight, balance, and clarity. Until then, remain where you are. Walk without needing to be seen. Serve without needing to be affirmed. And remember, you were never forgotten. You were being protected.